This is something we're going to be discussing quite a lot. Iraqi use of chemical weapons here during the Iran-Iraq War. All of this fighting we're seeing is happening along this very narrow front right here, just as World War I was fought along the Western Front. Very little movement, so too is this war fought along the front with very little movement, but like World War I, with massive casualties on both sides, especially on the Iranian side.
Mustard gas and nerve agents were delivered by small, innocent-looking planes based near Baghdad. ITM's cameras were prevented from filming more of them. At first, the assailants' use surprised the Iranians, who were forbidden by Ayatollah Khomeini from following suit. In contrast, the chemicals that injured these people had been developed in Iraq under Saddam Hussein's personal supervision. At first, the world ignored the evidence, but in time, chemicals would be used in a manner that would shock international opinion. And everywhere, that other reminder of the First World War, the huge death toll. Though in fact light by those standards, every offensive cost each side an average of 15,000 dead, devastating by modern ones. Tehran, capital of Iran. 400 miles from the battlefield, it became a new front line from 1984. As Iran seized the initiative, Iraq began air and missile attacks in the so-called War of the Cities.
Iraqi leaders, Saddam Hussein in particular, are becoming very desperate 4 years into the war. They've resorted to chemical weapons. Their second most important city, Basra, right here near the Kuwait-Saudi border, is under threat. And so Saddam Hussein begins to attack the capital, Tehran, on the other side of the Tabriz Mountains. However, Tehran is much further from the front than Saddam's capital of Baghdad. This begins the second phase of the war, which is often dubbed the War of the Cities, between Baghdad and Tehran, with bombing raids and missile strikes hitting both cities.
Most devastating was the Scud-V missile, brought from Russia and adapted to take a lighter warhead over 350 miles. Night after night, thousands of Iranians left their homes in Tehran to take refuge in the hills above the city. More than any other conflict in this series, this was total war, reaching out to touch civilians as much as the military. In 3 separate wars of the cities, thousands of civilians on both sides were killed and many more injured. It brought no tangible military or psychological benefit to either side, only suffering. This was a clear attack on civilian morale, but partly through the wanton damage caused, it served instead to intensify Iranian patriotism. The Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Closer to the border than Tehran, it was vulnerable to tit-for-tat attacks as Iran replied in kind. But just as in Iran, the attacks, the deaths and the devastation served only to rally the people around the political system and leader that had been losing popularity. The war also presented an opportunity to Iraq's oldest internal enemy, the Kurds, who'd been fighting for an independent homeland since the First World War. At 21 million, it would be the most populous Middle Eastern state outside Iran, but included Iraq's rich northern oil fields. While huge armies slogged it out in the south, the Kurds fought an effective hit-and-run guerrilla war in the northern mountains. An Iranian helicopter hugs the hilltops, dodging Iraqi artillery to supply Kurdish rebels.
So what Iraq is facing here is a war on two fronts now. In reality, more like three fronts. There's the bogged down front line along the border, where Basra is threatened. There's the war of the cities. Baghdad is now coming under attack from Iranian fighter bombers and artillery. And now here in the north, the Kurds, who stretch into Iran and into Turkey and partially into Syria, were rising up again as they had done previously against the regime here in Baghdad. So a third front now against Kurdish guerrillas in the north.
Ghost towns in the foothills, legacy of Iraq's ruthless deportation of 250,000 Kurds in an attempt to prevent rebellion. Ruins now occupied by Iranian forces whose persistent offensive sustained Kurdish guerrilla action to threaten Iraqi oil fields. More than anti-Iraqi sentiments, they also brought the weapons to make guerrilla war effective. For these hills climbing east into the Himalayas hid a large and, unlike Afghanistan, cohesive guerrilla army. Known as the Peshmerga, they comprised two forces totaling 14,000 men under arms. Backed by Iran, Syria and Libya, their renewed resistance grew sharply from 1983. Soon they controlled a third of Kurdistan, pinning down 30,000 Iraqi troops. In this rugged terrain, guerrilla warfare was uniquely effective. The Kurdish leader, General Massoud Barzani, explained his objective.
The significance of this operation for us is its proximity to the city center and to the international highway, which is very important for the Iraqis. And beyond it, they have the oil pipeline which carries the Iraqi oil to Europe.
The guerrilla group is given its orders to attack Iraqi patrols on the main highway between the oil fields of Kirkuk and the Turkish border. This was an area where the Iraqis were particularly nervous about rebel action because it was now the only export route for oil from its northern fields. The casualties inflicted on Iraqi troops in such actions were less significant than their ability to disrupt oil traffic and divert large forces. And such actions were repeated constantly. In territory unsuitable for armoured columns, Iraq's generals resorted to shelling suspected Kurdish positions. The multiple rocket launcher was another formidable artillery piece, as effective here as in the flatlands of the southern front. Deep, strongly fortified dugouts, reminiscent of World War I, afforded some protection. But Iraq's frantic desire to stamp out this nagging opposition led to an action that shocked the world. Two jets swooped low to bomb a Kurdish town recently taken by Iran. An Iranian army camera caught the moment of impact not by explosives, but cyanide gas. In less time than it took Iranian helicopters to fly over Halabja, some 5,000 civilians were killed. Many were frozen in the vain act of trying to protect babies and children.
The city is Halabja. It's here in the north of the Iranian border. In fact, it's been occupied by